as we continue our series, What to Do with Jesus. And today we want to talk about our ability to access Him. Our ability to access Him. And really what we're going to talk about is the Lord's presence. Why does the Lord's presence have that ability to satisfy our inner man like nothing we've ever encountered? Just being in the presence of the Lord. When I was thinking about this message, I thought, one of the reasons I love to come to church is not only to see all you, but just because when we come together, we get to entertain the presence of the Lord. And God is just so gracious that He shows up. I mean, nothing says that God has to show up, and He shows up. And I love to watch, whether it's mature Christian or a seeker, begin to experience the presence of the Lord. And I just want to say this to you. If you're here tonight and you're a mature believer and you don't take advantage of worship, you're missing something big. Just to know that the presence of God wants to come and encounter you. I love to watch people who are coming towards the Lord and begin to experience His presence. Do you know that right now we have roughly 300 people going through Alpha? That's in middle school, high school, and our regular Alpha. 300 people. Now, what will happen in that, and if you don't know what Alpha is, it's a series of teachings that we do and talks and gatherings that allow people to express whatever questions they might have about Christianity. In that process, a number of them will come towards the Lord. And one of the things that I love to do is I love to watch people come to the Lord, and then I love to watch them try and figure this thing out. Because, as a matter of fact, this even happened to me this week. A relatively new guy that's been coming to church, he said, I just love coming to your church because I feel so good there. And I love that. I love to hear those kind of stories because I know it's not anything that we're doing. It's the presence of the Lord that's encountering them. But have you ever stopped to figure this out? That one of the major transitional phases that somebody comes to in their life is trying to figure out, how do I connect God? Not so much here, because that's really where they get connected. And I think that's a wonderful thing to think about, that people come to church and actually get connected to God. We score, touchdown, we win there. But here comes the transitional phase, is how do I take God into my everyday life? And that becomes a huge issue for us, whether we're seekers or whether we've known the Lord for a long time. And the problem with that is, at least in my estimation, is that we have flown solo out in the world for a long time. And it's really difficult for us to really relate that this God that we meet here on weekends actually wants to go with me to work. And really wants to encounter me during and throughout the day. And one of the reasons that you and I sit here tonight is because we realized that when we were piloting our own ship, we weren't doing a real good job. We needed leadership, and the leadership that we were experiencing at the present time was letting us down hugely. Every one of you should have said amen to that one. Because we were experiencing, and now we figure out, I am not living my life correctly. And so we invite Christ into our life. And then to find out this, friends, that He really wants to take over. See? And so now, how do I take this God that I have met here on the weekend, and I love His presence so much, how do I take Him into my everyday life? And this really comes around the whole idea that we have to rebuild, retool, reconstruct everything that we have done out there in the world, and realize that God's going to invade that area of our life too, and that He wants us to experience His presence there. As a matter of fact, let me take it one step further. I'm working on this theory, so I don't know how good it is in theology, but I think one of the major tools that God uses to transform our lives is His presence. Something happens to us in the presence of God. We don't even know what it is, but we come out of the presence of God and we go, man, I've been changed. Something has changed me. And for whatever reasons, we begin to relegate that just around that area of the church. And God says, oh, no. I'm much bigger than the church, He does not like to stay at church by Himself. likes to get out in the world, and so he likes to follow you around. So in this process, as you and I learn this renewal that God's going to do in our life, you and I have to come to a place, friends. Now this is really going to get right down to where the rubber meets the road, and that is this. And I think this is one of the biggest questions that every one of us face in our lives when it comes to the area of renewal. What will I allow into my life, and what will I not allow into my life? If I took a survey right now and went around the room and asked you, what is the number one issue in your life? Without doubt, the number one issue that would come up in your life is, I'm really busy. And for whatever reasons, friends, you and I have that innate ability to actually invite God out of our lives because we just find ourselves too busy. And now we have to, and I've thought about this word, and I really want you to think about it as well. We actually have to carve time out for God. And carving means something painful to me. I'm glad we carved the turkey, but when somebody's carving on me, I don't like it. And the idea of it is that I'm saying to God, and this is probably at the height of selfishness. I don't know of anything that is more selfish than this, saying, I got to carve time out in my life so you can come in. I got to make room for you. And something is just hugely wrong with that statement. God is not a segment of our life. We build our lives around Him. And by the way, when God comes into our life, He says this. Now notice this. I want you to walk with me. He doesn't say, and I'll go down your path, and we'll take a Sunday afternoon stroll together. He says, I want you to walk with me. Which means this, God is going somewhere. Now, friends, if you've heard this statement somewhere else, I want you to know something, and it's for no other reason than I want to make a point about it. You probably heard it here first, and that is this. Godliness is not a static fixity in somebody. It is a dynamic, because when God encounters your life, He's taking you somewhere. There's a purpose in mind. And so when it comes around to this re-engineering, you and I have to get to a place where we just have to say, okay, God, look, I need you in my life. And I need little reminders during the day so that I stop and just pause and invite you back into my life, because I want to experience your presence as I walk through the day. Now, Hebrews 13:5, and I want you to put it up there. And I want us to say this together, because it's really important for us to understand whether I feel God or not, whether I sense God's presence or not. God says these words, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. I want us to say it together. Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. I want to say it one more time. Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. Now, that means to me is this. God wants to encounter me during the day. He wants me to experience His presence. So if you have your little outlines, you want to follow along, let's take a look. 5 points during your day to connect with God. Taking it out of just the church realm, and now we're going to put it in. To me, friends, this is a huge message. And now we're going to put it into the realm of connecting with God every day in our lives. Number one is this. Establish in your heart, I will pursue God. Establish in your heart, I will pursue God. Hebrews 11:6. And without faith, and notice the word faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists. And notice this, and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him. Now, faith is a noumenal concept. I want you to listen to this for just a minute. Noumenal means above and beyond the grasp of science. And friends, you and I, every one of us here, have experienced faith. And faith is one of those things that enters our hearts, and actually, You and I have to decide at some point, because here's an absolute truth that you and I have to deal with. There is something in our heart that attracts us towards something. Whatever that something is, you and I have the ability to say, no, I won't pursue it, or yes, I will pursue it. And how you pursue it really is the vehicle by which we would call faith, because faith without works is dead, actually motivates you towards that goal. Now, you can have really good goals in your life, but the thing that actually motivates you towards that thing is called faith, and you have to put into series of steps to actually obtain that goal. Like, for instance, when you first get married, most couples sit down and say, we'd like to have a home someday. And over a period of time, you begin to work towards that, and then someday you actually buy that home and you go, wow, it worked. Here we are. And now we've got all these bills. Oh, God, help, But what got you there was faith. Now, here's the crazy thing about faith, friends. You can put your faith in something that's bad. And so you and I, at some point, we have to stop and say, look, is this thing that I'm pursuing, is it good or is it bad? Is it right or is it wrong? Is it righteous or is it unrighteous? And you and I, when we begin to decide what we are going to do about this particular goal, whatever it is, and we start moving towards it, you know what you'll find out? You'll begin to learn a lot about that object. And so you start to hear things, you start to learn things, you start to put them into practice, because that's the natural course of faith. Now, here's the kicker that I want every one of us to hear tonight. God says, according to His Word, I have put a measure of faith in you to seek me. In other words, here's what God is saying. Earnestly means to crave for, to desire, to earnestly look after, to investigate, all those things. And God says, I have put that in every one of your hearts. The question is, are you going to pursue that? Because nobody on that day when we stand before God are going to say these words, God, I really pursued you, but you did not respond. He says, I am a rewarder of those who diligently seek me. Now, let me just throw this out for your thinking and my thinking tonight. And it goes something like this. You and I have as much time to do anything that we want to do. And I can prove it to you statistically by how many hours a week Americans watch TV. There's absolutely no excuse for any of us to say, God, I do not have time to seek you. And before we ever get to these steps in our days, you and I just going to have to declare in our hearts, are we really pursuing God or aren't we? Because what I have to say, the rest doesn't even matter if we haven't decided in our heart that God is going to reward me if I seek Him. See, here's something I love as an old used car salesman, because I never got to do this. And that is to give away 100% guarantees. See, some of you are laughing already because you know that nobody can stand behind 100% guarantee. And I'm going to give one out tonight. And you know what I like about it? The best thing about it is I don't have to back it up. I just have to say it. God said, if you will seek me, I will reward you. Plain and simple. If you seek me, I'm going to reward you. And I put the equipment and the desire in your heart. What are you feeding? What's your desire about? See? And if you and I have a desire to walk with God, James tells us, if you'll draw near to me or close to me, I'll come close to you. You see? And so that whole platform has to sit upon, okay, God, I want to pursue you. Number 2 is this. Acknowledge God the first thing each morning. Acknowledge God the first thing each morning. Psalms 119, 147. I rise before dawn and cry for help. I have put my hope in your word. Now, I don't know how you wake up in the morning, but I want to tell you how I wake up in the morning. Badly. It is not a pretty sight, friends. I mean, I go through a series of barriers, segments, and revelations. And the sad part about it is they're the same every morning. I am not kidding you. My wife used to tell me this: you are not responsible for anything you say or do for the first 5 minutes you get up. Because I mean to tell you, it is a fog, people. And when I wake up in the morning, I am not kidding you at all, many mornings go something like this. Who am I? Where am I? What day is it? And what's this terrible odor? It's a guy thing. You women I know don't have that, but that's the way it goes with us. And then, at some point, I wished I could tell you that every morning I wake up, I go, "Good morning, Lord." It doesn't happen that way. But at some point during those revelations, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian too, And that's the way some of you respond too. It's about the third song. You go, "Oh yeah, I love God." And at some point during that, it's like, "Oh yeah, God, I really do want my life to honor you today." At some point during that raising from the dead, that there's a conscious moment where I just go, "God, I want to honor you today. I want my life to honor you today." And friends, I want you to know this: if we're going to reconstruct, rebuild, retool our lives, at some point you and I have to start with new habits in our life. God says, "Invite me in. Invite me in, and I'll come in." And if it's to you, if it's rolling out of bed and onto your knees, some of you may need to get an okay from your doctor before you do that. But some habit, whether it's, most of the time when I'm laying there, I verbalize something to God. I want to start this day right. I want to acknowledge you. I want you to know that my life is around you today, and I want to honor you. And friends, I think it's through that kind of habit, that kind of alarm that goes off. I don't know of anybody that enjoys the alarm, and if you do, we will pray for you. But there's that kind of alarm that goes off that we begin to recognize, I am forming a habit in my life because I really want to experience the presence of God today. I want to start the day off right. Number 3 is this: share breakfast with God. Some of you go, "Man, I cannot believe this." And by the way, if this remotely sounds like most of these points around food, it's just happenstance, okay? Psalms 90:14, "Satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all of our days." Now, this is not breakfast at Tiffany's. Never watched the movie, friends. It sounds like a chick flick to me anyway. And do you know what else that I have found out about breakfast at Tiffany's? You can't get it there. Come here, you'll never know what you might learn, but there is no breakfast at Tiffany's. But I want to tell you something about my life and about breakfast. Never ate breakfast. Hated breakfast. And then, about 10:30 or so, I could eat the refrigerator. And then I began to look like it. And I realized that over a period of time that was not healthy or wise. Our mothers always told us the most important meal of the day was breakfast. And just learning to eat. And this is something, and I've done this now for about the last 6 or 7 months. This is relatively new as far as the physical end of this. I've been eating breakfast every morning. And friends, I want to tell you something. I have to force myself. God agrees. Thank you. He's punctuating that point. And I tell you, sometimes I look at that cereal and just go, give me grace. But now, I'm going to tell you what happens after that. I have found out that I have greater energy, greater creativity. I'm a lot more ambitious towards whatever I have to do in the morning. And there is just something about eating breakfast now that I'm on the other side of it that I realize how important it is. Now, you obviously know where I'm going with this. I've had breakfast with God basically my whole adult life. I have just spent time with God in the morning. And it's something that I cherish. It's something that I look for. And I boiled down to 3 things that I do with God practically every morning. I'd be a liar if I stood up here and said I did it every morning. But most mornings you will catch me. And you know what I have found out? That I have found places that I go to in seasons of the year. I'm outside right now. And before too long, just because of nature, I will move inside. And I've got a place. And you know where that place is? Around where we eat. And anyhow, I boiled this whole thing down to 3 things that I really connect with God on. And you can do your quiet time in any way, and I bet you would come to these 3 same areas. You know what it is? Worship, reading the Bible, and prayer. And it's just an alarm. God, I'm inviting you into my life. I'm carving this time out. I want to meet with you. Just want to have time with you. And friends, and I'm not here to scold anybody, but I'm just here to say this to you. If you're so busy in your life that you can't carve some time out to spend breakfast with God, you're too busy. You're just too busy. I mean, God didn't call us into this thing for a bunch of dues. He called us into this thing to have a relationship with Him. And you know, actually, as the church grows larger and larger, you know one of my greatest concerns is? For me and for the staff, is that we get so busy we miss relationship. Can't do it. Can't do it. Number 4 is this. Are you still with me? Look for others who hang around Jesus. Luke 14:13-14. Now we're talking about today, and this happens to do with lunch, but listen to this. But when you give a banquet, and this is Jesus, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Now, I've discovered something about myself is that I highly enjoy routine. Anybody else here like that? As a matter of fact, it is known within my family that when we go to an established restaurant and we go back there again and again and again, guess what I get? The same thing. And you know what my wife calls that? Boring. And my wife is a little bit more adventurous in that area and a little bit more exotic, and she will order some of the things that you can't even pronounce. And I just want to give you a little tip here. If you can't pronounce it, don't order it. And this comes from experience. And she scores lots of times, really good. And then sometimes it's not, and she wants me to taste it. And you know what I call that? Predictable. Now, just to take it another step further, we're not on the marriage retreat this weekend, obviously, and we got like 160, 170 people up there this weekend and join. So here's what I want you to do, husbands and wife. I want you to go home and just experience a little bit what their experience. I want you to ask your mate, do you see me as boring or predictable? And then have a discussion. And then enjoy your marriage retreat together. Now, I said all this because I really am going somewhere, is that I really like routine. As a matter of fact, I am so routine that I knew I had to break out of this. And just a few weeks ago, I took off on my motorcycle, and my destination was Boise, Idaho. And the only 2 things that I wanted to do is I wanted to make it to Boise, number 1, without a map, and number 2, never get on an interstate. And just to satisfy all of you, I didn't. It's true. I didn't make either goal. And that's another story. But you know, it was fun because I got to a fork in the road. You know that Yogi Berraism? When you come to a fork in the road, take one. I did it. Yeah, well, anyway. And it's just fun, pulling up there and going, wow, that looks a little east or west. Let's go. And go that way, and then go find another one, go that way. And it was really adventurous. But on my way back home, I got onto a road that I knew very well. And I just felt the Lord speak to me. You're really comfortable, aren't you? Now, when God speaks to you a question, friends, indelibly, you know that He knows the answer. And it's like, okay, I get it. I do feel really comfortable. And He just began to speak to me about you're too comfortable in a lot of relationships. And you know what he meant by that, friends? Is that when we go out to lunch, when we do things socially, it's just easier to connect with people that we already know. And Jesus says here, when you have a banquet. Now, why does Jesus say this? I want you to go towards the crippled, the lame, the blind, and all those other people. You know why it is, friends? It's because it's really difficult to be around people that we're uncomfortable with. And Jesus says, if you want to meet me during the day, you got to hang out with the people that I'm hanging out with. And I just want you to know, there is an incredible blessing that awaits every one of us when we choose. And I'm going to challenge you with something. When we choose just to have lunch with somebody that we normally wouldn't have lunch with. As a matter of fact, when I was praying about this, what I felt like? I felt like the Lord was saying, even as you're speaking it, I'm going to be giving names to people at their work and at their neighborhood or wherever it might be, that you're just supposed to. And friends, let me say this. It doesn't matter if it's lunch, and it doesn't matter if it's coffee, and it doesn't matter if it's donuts. It doesn't matter where it is. And it's not even for you to share Jesus or invite them to church. It's just to hang around them. You see? And you and I will find out this, is that during the day, you will get to that place, you'll recognize who it is, and then there'll be automatically a resistance to that rises up within you. And you just have to come to the place and say, wait a minute. If I'm going to encounter God here, and this is what my life is all about, then I'm going to do what I know the Spirit of God is speaking to me to do. And let me just whisper this to you. Every one of us hear the voice of God in those areas. You see? And that's why He commands us. I want you to go to those people, and there you'll encounter me. Number 5 is this. Be intentional with your evenings. Psalm 63. Man, I am going really good pace here, aren't I? Well, I'll just slow down a little bit. No, some of you go, oh no, I saw that, Be intentional with your evenings. Psalm 63:6. On my bed, I remember you. I think of you through the watches of the night. Evening times. Don't you enjoy evening times? Or a special time of the day when we get to unwind and enjoy the end of the day. Now, let me just explain to you something about myself. I'm the type of guy that really has to have a start and a finish. I have to start a day and I have to finish a day. Like I know that when I get up in the morning, what time I'm supposed to be at work, and then I know what time I'm supposed to quit. I have to quit. I have to get away from this place. As a matter of fact, Cheryl and I have called this place, and affectionately so, the black hole. And what we mean by that is it doesn't matter when you come here 24/7, you can find something to do. And at some point, I just realized this in my own life, that I have to have a place where I quit. When I go home, I don't want to do church work. I want to quit. Cheryl is the type of a person where she can continue to talk about church and even get on the computer and do a lot of church work, and that's wonderful, and that's the way her personality is. I can't do that. I have to break the finish line. I have to get to the end of the day. As a matter of fact, my week is that way too. When I start, my week starts on Tuesday at noon. And you know when I'm going to finish this week? This marathon that I'm on, tomorrow at about 12:30. And when I'm done at 12:30, friends, I'm done. I have to finish. And when I finish, and if I finish well, and if I feel like I've done everything I know what to do, and I finish well, you know what it does? And I've just learned this. It sets me up for a good week next week. See? And I just want you to think about this when it comes to the end of your day. How do you finish your day? How do you finish your day? And just think about that for a minute. And I'm not going to try and step on anybody's toes or anything else, but I want you to think about this particular question. I wonder how many of us finish our day with Letterman, Leno, or some kind of news program. Just let that settle in. You know, and here's the point. I don't think that I finish well when I finish with those kind of thoughts at the end of my day. I want to tell you something. As a matter of fact, worship team, if you'll come up. I want to tell you just how good God is to me. Because I think it's really healthy for us when we get to the place that we're going to retire for the night, that we begin to think just like the psalmist did. You know, I'm going to think of you through the watches of the night. You know, I want to go to bed with you on my mind. And I had an experience this week. And one of the ways that I do this is I like to rehearse in my mind, well, where did God encounter me today? Where do I feel like I sensed the presence of God? And I had a situation this week where I was in my car downtown, and I had to pray. I just had to stop and pull over. Just pull in, and just sit there and said, God, you know, I really need to hear from you right now. And he just spoke something that was so personal, just so, wow, that was God. And I go on and I go to this meeting, and sitting in this meeting, somebody else was running, and they said something that God had just spoken to me minutes ago. And here I am in a public place, and I want to cry. I just want to cry. So when I go to bed that night, you know what I'm thinking of? God encountered me. God encountered me there. Something happened. And it just overwhelms me to think that here's this big, big God. And he takes time to speak to a guy like me. And I never, ever tire of that. Just knowing that it was the voice of God. Now, I'd like to really end this on a good note. And it's just so good of God. And then this week, where I was in a situation and I knew it was God. And you know what I did as your pastor? I disobeyed. And you know what I did that night in my bed? I repented. I said, God, boy, you got a lot of work to do here on this old guy. You sure you still want to stay in the ball game? You know, and of course we know that God's forgiveness and his mercies are new every morning. But you know, if I took a survey tonight and asked you, did you miss it? I think most of us go, yeah, I missed it. And you know, it's a win-win situation, friends. You know why? Because we know ultimately we've encountered the presence of God. And encountering the presence of God, there's a process that he begins to change us. And we begin to recognize God's out there just like he's in here. And that all I have to do is invite him into my life on a daily basis. Not just have my quiet time, and I'm guilty of this too, and then putting him aside. But then saying, God, I want to encounter you for the rest of the day. Lunch, dinner, those things, whatever the alarms are in your life, allow God to speak to you. I want you to stand. And as we pray and as we worship the Lord, then I'm going to come back and pray with you. And I believe that God's going to do some really neat stuff in our lives this week as we begin to encounter his presence out there in the world. Amen? Let's worship the Lord together.